Hey everybody, welcome into this week's episode of Tony's Spot on Fishing. I'm your host, Tony Croix, and it is the start of the fall inland trout season. October 21st. Season technically opens at 5 a.m. They didn't open the gates up here at Blackwell till 6, but that's what we're doing today. We're going to show you all the tips, tricks, and techniques how we can catch these rainbow trout that they stock every year in the fall. Right here, Blackwell Forest Preserve. That's all this week on Tony's Spot on Fishing. So we're starting out this morning actually running slip bobbers. Now, as you can tell, it's still dark out. Sun has not come up yet, so we're running the lighted bobbers. You can get some where you either insert the glow stick or you have the option of the battery operated lighted ones. Ooh, one just jumped over there. We don't want to go too deep. 2-3 feet is about it. Trout generally feed when they're active, they feed up. So we want to hang our presentation higher up in the water column. About 3 feet is about the max we start at. I like to focus on the wind blown areas. Like we have a wind coming almost across through this bay. Those trout a lot of times will follow the current and we can get a nice drift on our slip bobbers that way. Now, if you're running a live bait presentation, some guys will run minnows. Stand the chance of catching a couple bonus crappies too. Our little secret that we do every year in the spring and the fall is actually pinching off half a night crawler. Running it on a number 6 eagle claw bait holder hook. Now, in the spring this year, spring was phenomenal. But the bite was really weird. That water was still super cold. They were very lethargic in the bites, and they would sit there and play with it for quite a while. So we're going to see how they're going to react now in the fall. The water temp's not as cold as it was in the spring. The other thing I can't stress enough is running light line. So many times people make the mistake of trying to come out here with 8 pound or 10. They get real line shy real quick. We just run 6 pounds. Some guys will even go 4. Now, if you're going that light, down to 4 especially, make sure you have a net, because when you go to flip them or drag them up on shore, you may pop them off. Normally, they're smaller trout. This spring was amazing, the size of the trout that they had put in. The DNR had dropped in Blackwell 2,500 to 3,200 pounds. That's a pretty wide spectrum. I mean, so it's hard to say exactly what size we're going to see this year. And we'll show you some of the other baits too that we're going to throw, some of the crankbaits and the spinners in just a little bit. But while the sun is still not visible, we're going to continue on throwing the slip bobbers. Just going to let them eat it. This is what they do. They'll play with it. That's a bigger piece of worm on there. Wait for them to swim off a little more. Nope, no dice. But they got my worm. All right. Now you're probably wondering, Tone, that's such a long time you let that thing sit. We're pinching off about a half a crawler. And you're going to have to play around various times day to day. There's times, a little quarter of a crawler. There's times a full crawler. Today, so far, it seems that half-size crawler. And for whatever reason, and they're better sized trout, and they'll sit there and they'll play with it. And so many times when we first kind of came on this pattern of fishing the crawlers, we had thought it was the bluegills messing around with us. But for whatever reason, it's a light bite when they're eating a crawler. I'll tell you what, that's a little bit of action now. We're having some bites. We're going to stick with it. We brought some of the other baits with. We may go to that in a little bit, but for right now, we're going to stick with the bobber routine. Oh, he's a jumper too. now you kind of see what we were saying, how long you got to let them eat it sometimes. It's just kind of how it goes with this crawler. Oh, get out of that weed flat. Don't you get in there. Not a big guy, but a trout nonetheless. And he is right in the corner of the mouth. Whoa!
Nope. Your phone's right behind your foot.
Okay.
It's gonna go in the water.
We almost lost a phone. Oh, that's Bob's.
Yep.
All right, let's hold this little guy up. Slippery little devil, aren't you? Well, there we go. He's not a very big guy, but that is, compared to the spring, they were just massive in comparison. And that could be why we've been getting some of the lighter bites than even usual. But there is one. We're going to get a little stringer, put him on there. Got him. Oh, he's a jumper. Come here. There we go. Boy, that one was a little more aggressive than the first few bites we've had. There we go, another little trout. Like I said, this is nowhere near the size that they were in the springtime. In the spring this year, it was unbelievable the size of these fish, but this is what we have to work with this year. It's the little stockers. Now you are allowed to keep 5 per person on these fish, so no size limit to them. They can be this length, which is what they are. But if you could bring home 5 of these guys, you'd have a nice little meal there. We'll get him on the stringer, see if we get some more. Bobber bite, it seemed to kind of die off. We actually went to that little teeny inline spinner from Blue Fox. And that's that Magnum Flash series that they do. Now what I like about this bait, it's got a little heavier weight, and it's also got a willow leaf blade to it, so it's a lot more flash, and you can actually run it a little bit lower into the water column. Just a little bit of crystal flash and hackle feather on that trailer, but just a dynamite little package like that. But yeah, the bobber bite had kind of seemed to slow down a bit, and that's why I always bring 2 rods with me. I always bring one for throwing either an inline spinner like this or a crank, and then also one for throwing a bobber. Now, you know, rod selection and it plays a crucial part in being able to throw these kind of baits that we're doing. Now, like for the spinner, I'm throwing it on a medium light, 6.9 medium light. My bobber rods are very long, real soft tip, almost a noodle rod. And that'll help get us the casting distance we're looking for, even when we're facing a stiff breeze like we're in right now. And one other thing you're going to want to also have with you, aside from your trout, or aside from your fishing license, I should say, is the trout stamp itself. Now there's 2 types. There's the Great Lakes, and then there's the inland. To do this kind of fishing, you got to have that inland stamp. Hopefully, you know, it's finally starting to warm up a little bit. It's been a chilly morning, a lot cooler than they had originally forecasted it to be here. So hopefully, a little bit of warm up will get these fish going a little bit better. Like I said, we've missed a handful of fish on the bobbers, and we've landed those 2. They're a lot smaller, and really they're back to their normal size in comparison to the treat we got this spring out here. This spring was a lot of 2 and 3 pound trout. I mean, that's pretty sweet. But this is the typical stockers, kind of what you see here. We're standing, there's just one little lone pipe right here. And there's a very small channel right off the pipe between the two weed flats. And it's kind of nice because you're able to throw, you know, your baits through here, you know, be it your spinners or if you were to try to throw a crankbait. Now on a windy day like this, it'd be pretty hard to throw some of the smaller crankbaits that we generally use for the trout. It would just be, I mean, you'd make a 3-foot cast at the most. But with these spinners, the way they're front weighted like this, we can get that depth to it and we can get the casting distance to it. And pretty much when we're firing it off, just right around, straight out from this little pipe here, and you'd be surprised how many times on a crankbait or a spinner, they'll follow it in and actually eat it all the way right at your feet. It's kind of funny. But the bobber bites have all been on that weed edge to the break line. And it seems the moving baits, it's a little bit closer to shore. Again, it's just part of figuring out the puzzle for these fish. Now it is opening day, so it's going to be a little bit of a shock for these fish. You know, the lakes are closed down for 2 weeks prior to opening it up for fishing. They stock them, and then the lakes rest for a couple weeks, let the fish get acclimated. And it's kind of a shock when all of a sudden there's all this fishing pressure and they see all the lines in the water and baits flying overhead. But we've had great opening days in trout season. We've had some so-so days. We've had days like this too, where we've really had work for every bite we've gotten. The good thing is, it seems once we start seeing those fish jumping a little bit, that's usually when there's some action, be it now a couple hits on the spinner, bobbers going down, things of that nature. And again, I tell you, I really firmly believe in it. Follow those wind currents. That is the biggest key out here. Wind-blown shorelines, or even if it's angled in, that was just weeds, but if they're angled in, you get good drifts with your live bait, but also these fish really follow that food source. So the food source is getting blown around, the warmer water gets pushed to one end of the lake, and that's where they'll congregate then. So just some little keys to focus on when you come out here to Blackwell or any of the other lakes, depending on the county you're in, that stock the fall rainbow trout. Hoo!
There we go.
That's a little better one.
That is much better. We're going to switch off though. We're going to let Tony do this because he's the man with the pliers. And he's going to talk about what's happening here.
Now here we go. Put them right down here. That's a little better one from what we were seeing this morning. Took a little break off of that afternoon lull. Look at that, right in the tooth line too. That's perfect hook placement on these fish. There's so much bone and cartilage in there. But there we go. Male there, you can see the milk coming out there. But basically, we actually turned around, came back for this evening pattern. A lot of times when you get those afternoon lulls, which is what we experienced earlier today, everything shut down, the jumping stopped. We literally, you got that small window just before sunset. Now keep in mind, on these forest preserve lakes, they're going to chase you out of here right after dark. But it's that small window where magic can happen. But just to give you a little excitement here, the season's opened up today, as we've said before. And I mean, it should go for another week, 2 weeks of real hot action before it starts tapering down and those fish get overfished and fished out of the lakes. But enjoy and get out here and get in on some of this action. We had a lot of fun producing it for you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tony Krizek, and we can't wait to see you right back here again on Tony's Spot on Fishing.